What would you do if a simple trip to the bank turned your entire world upside down? At 73, Edward Harrison thought he knew the painful truth about his past. His grandson had drowned 12 years ago, a tragic accident that tore his family apart. But when a young bank teller slips him a desperate note in a familiar handwriting, everything Edward believed was a lie. "Vovo, fuja depressa!" Grandpa, run quickly. The handwriting belongs to Finn, his supposedly dead grandson. Now Edward must unravel a web of family secrets, confronting unimaginable betrayal from those he trusted most. With trembling hands and an aching heart, this elderly man becomes an unlikely detective, racing against time to find a boy who might still be alive, hidden in plain sight by powerful people with dangerous secrets. If you think family drama ends with arguments at Thanksgiving dinner, this story will show you how deep deception can go when blood ties become tangled with lies. Subscribe now to follow Edward's heart-wrenching journey to discover the truth and possibly reunite with the grandson he buried only in words. Like, comment, and share where you're watching from. And let me know if you'd run from the bank too. My legs were swollen, as they always get on cold days here in Asheville. I had just finished attending the 9 o'clock mass, like I did every third day of the month, and was heading to the bank. Little did I know that this would be the last day of my life as I knew it. I'm not much for going out these days. At 73, the world seems to move a little too fast for my liking. My son Michael hasn't visited in months, not since that argument with his wife Rachel. They live just 20 minutes away, but it might as well be another country. The silence in my house has become a companion I never wanted. The First National Bank on Cherry Street has been my bank for 42 years. I know every crack in the marble floor, every flicker in the fluorescent lights. Miss Patty at the information desk always gives me a butterscotch candy, even though I pretend I don't want it. Small kindnesses keep me going these days. "Morning, Mr. Harrison," she called as I shuffled in, my cane tapping rhythmically against the polished floor. "Cold one today, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling the weight of my arthritis in every joint. "The Lord sends us weather to test our patience, Patty." The line moved slowly. 3 people ahead of me, a mother with a fussy baby, a businessman typing furiously on his phone, and an elderly woman even older than me, counting coins from a plastic bag. I didn't mind. Tuesday mornings weren't for rushing. When my turn finally came, I approached the teller window. Behind the bulletproof glass sat a young man I'd never seen before. His name tag read, Thomas. He couldn't have been older than 25, skinny with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous twitch in his left hand. "How can I help you today, sir?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I slid my withdrawal slip under the glass. "Just my monthly draw, please. $200 in 20s. As he processed my transaction, I noticed something odd. His hands were trembling. Not the slight shake of youth rushing through a task, but the violent tremor of someone terrified. His eyes kept darting to the security camera in the corner, then to the manager's office, then back to me. "Are you all right, son?" I asked. He didn't answer, just kept counting bills. When he pushed the cash under the glass partition, I did what I always do. Counted it slowly, bill by bill. It's not that I didn't trust the bank, it's just that at my age, counting money is one of the few mental exercises I still perform with confidence. 10 20s, $200. Simple math for a simple life. But between the 5th and 6th bill, I felt something different, something that didn't belong. A piece of paper, folded small and tight. I looked up at Thomas, confused. His eyes were now brimming with tears, his face a mask of pure terror. He mouthed something I couldn't understand, then glanced again at the security camera. Slowly, I unfolded the note, keeping it hidden beneath my palm. 3 words hastily scrawled in blue ink. "Vovo fuja depressa." Grandpa, run quickly. My heart seized in my chest. The world around me seemed to slow, then freeze. That handwriting, the peculiar way the F curved at the bottom, the distinctive slant of the D, I knew it instantly. It was Finn's handwriting. My grandson Finn, who had drowned 12 years ago when he was just 8 years old. The grandson I had buried without ever seeing his body. My breathing became shallow, my vision narrowing to a pinpoint. The young teller's face was desperate now, his eyes pleading with me to move, to understand, to run. I stuffed the money and the note into my wallet with fingers that suddenly felt numb and clumsy. My cane slipped from my grasp, clattering loudly on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the bank like a gunshot, causing several people to turn and stare. "Sir, do you need assistance?" called Miss Patty from her desk. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I grabbed my cane, threw my worn leather satchel over my shoulder, and moved toward the exit without even saying goodbye, breaking a lifelong habit of politeness. And then I ran. Yes, I ran. With my swollen legs and arthritic knees, I ran like I hadn't in decades. My lungs burned with each desperate breath. My heart thundered against my ribs like it might burst through. But I ran, pushing past the confused faces of strangers on the sidewalk, ignoring their looks of concern and alarm. Rain had started to fall, making the sidewalk slick and treacherous. Twice I nearly fell, my old leather shoes sliding on the wet concrete. But something primal drove me forward. Fear, confusion, or perhaps a terrible, impossible hope. I ran 3 blocks before my body betrayed me. My chest tightened with a familiar pressure that forced me to stop, collapsing onto a bench in Jefferson Square Park. I sat there, gasping for breath, raindrops mixing with the sweat on my forehead. Only then did I dare to pull out the note again, examining it more closely in the grey morning light. The paper was torn from a notepad, the kind with blue lines and a red margin. Standard office supplies. But the writing, oh God, the writing. That was when the thought hit me like a blade to the heart. I knew that handwriting. I would recognize it anywhere. It belonged to a dead boy, my dead grandson. But how? How could this be? What was I running from? And more terrifyingly, what was I running toward? I looked back in the direction of the bank, half expecting to see someone following me. The street was empty except for a black sedan parked across from the park, its engine idling. Through the rain-streaked window, I could make out the silhouette of someone watching. My hands began to shake uncontrollably as the impossible truth dawned on me. Finn might be alive, and if he was, then everything I'd been told for the past 12 years had been a lie. I sat on that park bench for what felt like hours, my body shivering not just from the cold, but from the earthquake happening inside me. The rain had soaked through my tweed jacket, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on was the small piece of paper clutched in my trembling hands, a message in a handwriting I'd committed to memory years ago. The black sedan across the street had driven away after about 20 minutes, but not before I'd memorized the first 3 characters of its license plate, JGT. Not much to go on, but my old teacher's mind still clung to details like a drowning man to driftwood. As the rain eased to a drizzle, I carefully refolded the note and tucked it into my wallet's inner pocket, right behind the faded school photo of Finn, my only grandson, the light of my life, and supposedly dead for the past 12 years. Vovo, he had called me. Not grandpa, but the Portuguese word for grandfather that I had taught him when he was just 4. My late wife Maria was from Lisbon, and teaching Finn her language had been our special bond. No one else in the family bothered to learn more than a few courtesy words. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me like the rain. Finn had been such a bright, curious child, always asking questions, always watching everything with those intelligent blue eyes, Maria's eyes. When he was 7, he'd written me a birthday card in Portuguese. The letters were wobbly, childish, but unmistakable, with that peculiar curve on the F and the distinctive slant of the D that I now saw mirrored in this terrifying note. My son James had married young, too young I thought, to a woman named Catherine, pretty with a sharp mind and sharper tongue. I never quite warmed to her, though I tried for James's sake. She came from money, old Carolina money, and never let us forget it. But she'd given us Finn, so I made my peace with her cool demeanor and calculating eyes, until that day in June, 12 years ago. It was an accident, they told me. Finn was playing by Miller's Creek. He slipped, hit his head on a rock and fell into the water. I remembered how my world collapsed that day, how the colors drained out of everything. I remembered Catherine's tears, too perfect, too controlled. I remembered James, hollow-eyed and distant like he'd retreated somewhere even grief couldn't reach. I wasn't allowed to see the body. Too damaged, they said. Better to remember him as he was. The funeral was closed casket. Catherine insisted on cremation immediately after. Our family tradition, she explained, though I'd never heard her mention such a tradition before. A month later, she disappeared with the ashes, telling James she needed time alone to grieve. She never returned. James spiraled into depression and alcoholism after that, barely functioning. Eventually, he remarried, a meek woman named Emily who seemed more nurse than wife. They moved across town and our relationship dwindled to obligatory holiday phone calls and the occasional awkward dinner. And now this note, this impossible note in my dead grandson's handwriting. I finally forced myself to stand up from the bench, my joints protesting with sharp stabs of pain. The square had emptied as the rain intensified again, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the distant rumble of thunder. Making my way back to my small bungalow on Maple Street was an exercise in paranoia. Every car that passed made me flinch. Every stranger's glance felt loaded with hidden meaning. By the time I reached my front porch, fumbling with cold fingers to unlock the door, I was exhausted and drenched. Inside, I went through the motions of normal life, hanging my wet coat, making tea, turning on the small electric heater that kept my arthritis at bay. But nothing felt normal anymore. The quiet house that had been my refuge now seemed full of shadows and whispers. I placed the note on my kitchen table under the harsh fluorescent light and studied it again. The paper was cheap, the kind found in any office supply store. But the handwriting... I took out the birthday card Finn had made me 20 years ago from my keepsake box and placed it beside the note. The resemblance was undeniable. The same peculiar formation of letters, the same pressure points where the pen had pressed harder into the paper. It was older, more mature, as would be expected from a child who had grown, but unmistakably Finn's handwriting. But if Finn was alive, where had he been all these years? And why would the young bank teller pass me a note from him? What danger was I supposed to be running from? The telephone rang, startling me so badly I knocked over my teacup, sending amber liquid spreading across the table. I watched it seep into the edges of Finn's old card before I could move to save it. "Hello?" I answered, my voice cracking. Silence on the other end, just breathing, soft and measured. "Who is this?" I demanded, a sudden anger cutting through my fear. The breathing continued for another few seconds, then the line went dead. I stood there, the receiver still clutched in my hand, as a terrible suspicion took root in my mind. What if Catherine hadn't disappeared to grieve? What if the drowning, the cremation, all of it had been a carefully orchestrated lie? And if so, why? What could possibly be worth stealing a child's life, worth inflicting such pain? I had always been a cautious man, a high school history teacher who valued facts and evidence. But now, standing in my kitchen with a note that defied reason and a growing certainty that I'd been deceived in the cruelest way imaginable, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I needed to find the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Even if it meant facing the possibility that my own son might be involved in something unforgivable. I barely slept that night. Every creak of my old house made my heart race. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. I kept the note and Finn's birthday card under my pillow, like talismans against the darkness that had suddenly enveloped my world. When dawn finally broke, pale and watery through my bedroom window, I'd made my decision. I had to go back to the bank. It took me nearly 2 hours to gather the courage. I dressed with unusual care. My best brown slacks, a pressed shirt, the tweed jacket Maria had given me for our 40th anniversary. If I was walking into danger, at least I would do it with dignity. The morning was unseasonably cold for April in North Carolina, the sky a threatening slate gray. My neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, waved from her porch as I made my way down the street. I forced myself to wave back, to pretend that this was just another Tuesday, that my entire understanding of reality hadn't been shattered less than 24 hours ago. "You're out early, Edward," she called. "Off to see those grandkids of yours?" The innocent question felt like a knife to my gut. I mumbled something non-committal and hurried on, leaning heavily on my cane. The ghost of Finn's presence suddenly so strong, I could almost feel his small hand in mine as we walked this same route years ago. First National Bank looked exactly as it had yesterday, solid, respectable, unchanged. But to me it now seemed ominous, a facade hiding secrets I couldn't begin to comprehend. I stood across the street for several minutes, watching people come and go, searching for anything unusual. The black sedan was nowhere to be seen. Inside, the bank was busier than yesterday. A line of customers snaked from the teller windows toward the door. I scanned the row of employees, my heart sinking when I didn't see Thomas, the young man who had passed me the note. Instead, there was an unfamiliar woman at his station, middle-aged with ash-blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of mild surprise. I joined the line, rehearsing what I would say. How I would ask about Thomas without raising suspicion. The minutes crawled by as customers were served one by one. When it was finally my turn, I approached the blonde woman's window, with my heart hammering against my ribs. "Good morning," I began, forcing a smile. "I was here yesterday and a young man helped me. Thomas, I believe his name was. I wanted to thank him for his assistance." The woman's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened, became calculating. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied, her voice as mechanically pleasant as a recorded message. "Thomas is no longer with our branch. He was transferred yesterday afternoon. Is there something I can help you with today?" Her response was too rehearsed, too immediate. No surprise, no checking with colleagues, no offer to pass on my thanks. Just a flat denial of access. "That's odd," I pressed, keeping my tone conversational. "He didn't mention anything about a transfer yesterday. It must have been very sudden." A flicker of annoyance crossed her features. "Bank policy, sir. Transfers happen all the time. Do you have a transaction to make today, or?" She let the question hang in the air, an unmistakable dismissal. I glanced at her name tag, and a chill ran down my spine. Amanda Dayton. Dayton. Where had I heard that name before? And then it hit me. Constance Dayton had been Catherine's college roommate. They'd remained friends after graduation. She'd even attended our family Christmas dinner the year before Finn's accident. A tall woman with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. I remembered how uncomfortable Finn had seemed around her, how he'd clung to my hand under the dinner table. Was this a coincidence? In my 73 years, I'd learned there were very few true coincidences in life. "Actually," I said, pulling out my checkbook, "I need to make a withdrawal." I filled out a slip for $50, sliding it across to her with hands I forced to remain steady. As she processed the transaction, I studied her face, searching for any resemblance to Constance. There was something around the eyes, perhaps, a similar sharpness. "Here you go, Mr. Harrison," she said as she counted out the bills. She'd never asked for my name. I took the money slowly, watching her expression. "I don't believe I mentioned my name today, Miss Dayton." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's in the system, sir. Have a nice day." The bulletproof glass between us suddenly seemed like the only thing keeping me safe. I left the bank on shaking legs, the $50 clutched in my hand. My mind was racing, connecting dots that I'd never noticed before. If Amanda Dayton was related to Constance, and Constance had been Catherine's friend, was this elaborate web of deception somehow tied to my former daughter-in-law? I walked home in a daze, barely noticing the path my feet took. By the time I reached my house, a plan was forming in my mind. A desperate, possibly foolish plan, but the only one I had. There was a place I hadn't visited in years, a place I'd been unconsciously avoiding. The basement of my house. After Catherine left and James spiraled into depression, he'd stayed with me for several months. He'd claimed the basement as his space, kept it locked, became agitated if I even mentioned going down there. When he eventually moved out to marry Emily, he'd taken very little with him, leaving the basement untouched, still locked, still forbidden. I'd respected his privacy, told myself it contained too many painful memories, but now I wondered if it contained something else entirely. Answers. The key to the basement door hung on a hook in my kitchen, unused for over a decade. I stared at it for a long moment, then reached for it with a trembling hand. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with possibilities and dangers I couldn't yet comprehend. As I stood at the top of the basement stairs, key in hand, I was struck by a memory of Finn asking me once about monsters in the dark. I'd assured him then that the real monsters weren't hiding under beds or in closets. They were the choices people made, the lies they told, the pain they inflicted on others. I never imagined I'd be searching for such monsters in my own home, left by my own son. Taking a deep breath, I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been used recently. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing a darkness that seemed to breathe. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, my hand fumbling for the light switch. The air that wafted up from below carried the unmistakable scent of mildew and long-neglected spaces. When my fingers finally found the switch and flipped it, a single bare bulb sputtered to life, casting harsh shadows across the steep wooden steps. For a moment I hesitated. At 73, a fall down these stairs could mean more than just pain. It could be the end of me. But the thought of Finn, possibly alive, possibly needing me, drove my feet forward. I gripped the handrail with white-knuckled determination and began my descent. Each step creaked beneath my weight, a mournful symphony of aged wood protesting after years of silence. 13 steps. I counted each one as I went down, a teacher's habit that had never left me. With each step, memories flooded back. James as a teenager, playing his records too loud down here. James and Catherine bringing baby Finn to show me the crib they'd set up in the corner. James alone, hollow-eyed, locking himself away after Finn's death and Catherine's departure. The basement was larger than I remembered, or perhaps it just seemed that way in the inadequate light. It had once been finished. Carpet on the floor, wood paneling on the walls, even a small half-bathroom in the corner. But time and neglect had taken their toll. The carpet was mottled with dark patches of mold. The paneling had warped in places, pulling away from the concrete walls behind it. The room still held the remnants of James's temporary residence. A fold-out couch against one wall, a small television set that looked ancient now, a desk piled with papers and old magazines. A thick layer of dust covered everything, disturbed only by what looked like recent footprints crossing from the stairs to the far corner of the room. I followed the trail with my eyes, noticing for the first time a large wooden chest pushed against the back wall. It wasn't something I recognized, certainly not a piece of furniture that had been in our family. It looked heavy, made of dark oak with metal reinforcements at the corners. Most disturbing of all, it was secured with a padlocked chain wrapped several times around its middle. My heart began to pound as I made my way toward it, navigating around discarded boxes and old furniture. The chain gleamed in the dim light, not tarnished as it should have been after years in a damp basement, but polished from recent handling. Next to the chest, half concealed behind a stack of boxes, was a metal trash can. Inside were the charred remains of what looked like papers, partially burned documents, their edges blackened but portions still readable. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the largest fragment, holding it close to my face in the poor light. It was a medical prescription form, the top half burned away but the bottom still legible. The patient name read Constance M. Dayton. The medication was something I couldn't pronounce, but the prescribing facility caught my eye. Pinehurst Psychiatric Hospital. I rummaged deeper, finding more fragments, insurance forms, hospital bills, admission papers, all for Constance Dayton, all from Pinehurst Psychiatric. One piece, larger than the rest, appeared to be part of an admission summary. The date on it, July 15th, 2013, sent a chill down my spine. That was exactly 1 month after Finn's drowning, exactly when Catherine had disappeared. My fingers trembled as I pieced together the fragments like a macabre puzzle. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Constance Dayton had been committed to a psychiatric facility for severe dissociative episodes and paranoid delusions. The admitting physician had noted, "Patient believes she is being persecuted by family members and former business associates." What connection did this have to Finn? To Catherine? To the young teller who had passed me the warning note? I turned away from the trash can, my eyes drawn to the chained chest once more. What secrets did it hold? I tugged at the padlock, knowing it was futile. It would take tools to break through, tools I didn't have at hand. As I straightened up, wincing at the pain in my back, something on the wall caught my eye. In the corner, partially hidden behind the chest, were markings on the concrete. I moved closer, squinting in the dim light. Words had been scratched into the wall, low down, at the height a child might reach. Crude, uneven letters formed a sentence that made my blood run cold. "Mamãe disse para eu não gritar." Mommy told me not to scream. The Portuguese words, the language I had taught Finn, the language no one else in the family spoke, stared back at me like an accusation. Below them, barely visible, was a small handprint pressed into what looked like dried clay or cement that had once been wet. A child's handprint, too small for an 8-year-old, but the right size for a 5 or 6-year-old. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the outline of those tiny fingers against my wrinkled skin. Finn had been here, not just after his supposed death, but imprisoned here, in my own home, under my very feet. While I grieved upstairs, while I respected James's privacy and his locked door, my grandson had been here, frightened, alone, forbidden even to cry out. The horror of it buckled my knees. I sank to the floor, the damp of the concrete seeping through my trousers as I stared at those scratched words. My mind reeled with questions. Had James been part of this? Had he kept his own son prisoner in his father's basement? Had Catherine known? Was she involved, or had she discovered the truth and been silenced, Committed to Pinehurst under Constance Dayton's name? And most importantly, where was Finn now? The sound of a car door slamming outside jolted me back to the present. Heavy footsteps crossed my front porch above. Then, the unmistakable sound of a key in the lock of my front door. Someone was entering my house. Someone who had a key. Panic seized me. My legs, treacherous at the best of times, now felt like lead weights as I struggled to rise from the damp concrete floor. Above me, footsteps moved through my home, deliberate, unhurried, familiar. The basement door stood open at the top of the stairs, a rectangle of light that suddenly felt like the narrowest of escape routes. I forced myself to think clearly. If someone had come to harm me, they wouldn't use a key. They wouldn't walk so casually. This was someone who believed they had a right to be here. "Dad, you home?" James's voice drifted down the stairs, and with it came a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief that it wasn't an immediate threat, followed instantly by a cold dread. What would I say to him? How could I face my son now, knowing what I suspected? I had to hide the evidence, the medical forms, the handprint on the wall, but there was no time. Already his footsteps were moving toward the kitchen, toward the open basement door. "Dad?" Closer now, confusion edging into his tone. I grabbed the burned documents and shoved them into my jacket pocket, then quickly moved toward the stairs, away from the incriminating chest and wall markings. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he would hear it. "Down here, James," I called, proud that my voice barely trembled. "Just looking for some old photo albums." His silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, backlit by the kitchen light. Even in shadow, I could see how much he'd aged in recent years. Shoulders stooped, hair thinned, the once athletic frame now slack with middle age and too much alcohol. "What are you doing down there?" His voice was sharp, suspicious. "That floor's not safe. The support beams have rot." "Just reminiscing," I replied, forcing a smile as I climbed the stairs, each step an agony for my arthritic knees. "Your mother's birthday is coming up. Would have been her 80th. The lie came easily, surprising me. Maria's birthday was in October, not April, but James had never been good with dates. He'd even forgotten Finn's birthday once, when the boy was 4. Catherine had covered for him, making excuses about work stress. Catherine. The thought of her sent a fresh wave of questions crashing through my mind as I reached the top of the stairs. James stepped aside to let me pass, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "Have you been sleeping?" "As well as any man my age," I deflected, moving past him into the kitchen. I needed distance, needed time to process what I'd discovered. "What brings you by? I didn't know you still had a key." James followed me, closing the basement door firmly behind him. I heard the distinctive click of the lock. "Emergency key. You gave it to me years ago, remember? Emily asked me to drop off some meatloaf for you. She worries you don't eat properly." On the kitchen counter sat a glass dish covered in foil, Emily's peace offering. She always sent food when James visited, as if feeding me was the only way she knew to connect with her father-in-law. That was thoughtful. Please thank her for me. I busied myself making tea, keeping my back to him, afraid my face would betray the storm of suspicion and heartbreak raging inside me. "You left the basement door unlocked," James continued, his voice carefully neutral. "You never leave it unlocked." I turned slowly, measuring my words. "Must have forgotten. My mind isn't what it used to be." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What were you really looking for down there, Dad?" The kettle whistled, a shrill interruption that saved me from having to answer immediately. I took my time pouring the boiling water over tea bags, watching the liquid darken. "I told you," I said finally. "Photo albums, memories." James made a non-committal sound, then glanced at his watch. "I should get going. Emily's waiting." "So soon?" I couldn't help the edge of sarcasm in my voice. His visits were always like this, brief, perfunctory, obligatory. "Work's been crazy, end of quarter reports." He was already moving toward the door, eager to escape. "Oh, I almost forgot. I found this in my attic. Thought you might want it back." He pulled a worn notebook from his jacket pocket and placed it on the counter. The faded blue cover was instantly familiar. My teaching journal from my last year at Asheville High, when Finn was still in kindergarten. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my hand hovering over it, not quite touching. "Like I said, the attic. Must have gotten mixed in with my stuff when I stayed here." With a perfunctory nod, James left, the front door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty house. I waited, watching through the kitchen window as his car backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. Only when I was certain he was gone did I open the notebook with trembling fingers. The pages were filled with my precise handwriting, lesson plans, student anecdotes, quotes I'd found meaningful. But scattered throughout were childish drawings in crayon and marker, Finn's work. He'd loved to help me plan my classes, adding his own illustrations to my dry academic notes. A dinosaur next to a lesson on the Civil War, a rocket ship beside notes on Shakespeare. I flipped through the pages slowly, memories washing over me with each one, until I reached the back of the notebook. There, tucked into the inside cover, was something that hadn't been there before, a yellowed index card with a name written in blocky capital letters, Finley M. Gray. Beneath it was a student ID number and what looked like a school code, St. Christopher's Academy, Waynesville. My breath caught. Gray wasn't our family name. It wasn't Catherine's maiden name either. And Waynesville was a small town about 40 miles west of Asheville. Not far, but far enough to hide a child who was supposed to be dead. The name had been violently crossed out with black marker, but not completely obliterated. Someone had tried to erase Finn's new identity but had failed, or perhaps had wanted me to find it. With shaking hands, I carefully removed the index card from its adhesive. Behind it, pressed flat against the notebook cover, was a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed a boy of perhaps 10 or 11, wearing the distinctive blue blazer and grey slacks of a private school uniform. His hair was darker than I remembered Finn's, cut short in a style that didn't suit his delicate features. But the eyes, those were Maria's eyes, blue and intelligent, with the same slight tilt at the corners. The boy in the photo was Finn, older, changed, but unmistakably my grandson. And according to the date stamp in the corner of the photo, it had been taken 4 years after his supposed death. My knees gave way, and I sank into a kitchen chair, the photograph clutched in my hand. The evidence was mounting, becoming impossible to deny. Finn hadn't drowned. He'd been taken, hidden, given a new identity, and my own son was involved somehow. But why? What possible reason could there be for such a monstrous deception? And most importantly, if Finn was still alive, being raised under a different name in Waynesville, why would someone at the bank warn me to run? Sleep never came that night. I sat in my kitchen until dawn, the school photograph of Finn, or Elliot Dayton as he was apparently now called, propped against the salt shaker in front of me. By the time the first grey light of morning filtered through my curtains, I'd made my decision. I was going to Waynesville. At 73, spontaneous road trips weren't my usual fare. My arthritic joints protested as I packed a small overnight bag, just essentials in case I needed to stay. I didn't know what I would find, but the magnetic pull of possibly seeing Finn again overcame any hesitation. The drive to Waynesville took just over an hour, winding through the Blue Ridge Mountains. In my younger days, Maria and I would bring James here for weekend picnics, marveling at the lush forests and quaint towns. Now the familiar landscape felt alien, as if the very trees were conspiring to hide secrets from me. St. Christopher's Academy wasn't difficult to find, an imposing brick building perched on a hillside overlooking the town. Its manicured lawns and stone archways spoke of old money and privilege, the kind of place that wouldn't ask too many questions if a substantial donation accompanied a new student's unusual paperwork. I parked across the street, watching as uniformed children spilled from buses and private cars. My eyes scanned each young face, looking for the features I'd memorized from the photograph. But the morning bell rang, and the courtyard emptied without a glimpse of Finn, or Elliot, as I needed to remember to call him. With the students in class, I gathered my courage and approached the administrative building. The receptionist, a silver-haired woman with cat-eye glasses and a permanent smile, looked up as I entered. "May I help you, sir?" Her voice was syrupy with practiced hospitality. "I hope so," I replied, matching her warmth while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm researching schools for my great-grandson. St. Christopher's came highly recommended." The lie came more easily than I expected. She seemed pleased, eager to extol the virtues of the Academy's curriculum and facilities. As she pulled glossy brochures from a drawer, I spotted a framed photograph on the wall behind her. Students assembled in rows, each grade in matching uniforms. "Is that this year's student body?" I asked casually. "Oh no, that's from last fall's Founders' Day celebration. We're due for a new one next month." I moved closer, scanning the rows of young faces. And there in the third row, fifth from the left, a boy with dark hair and Maria's blue eyes. Finn, my grandson, alive. The shock must have shown on my face because the receptionist's smile faltered. "Sir, are you all right?" I composed myself quickly. Fine, just reminded me of someone. Tell me, do you have many families from outside Waynesville?" She seemed relieved to return to her script. "Oh yes, we draw students from all over the region. Some families even relocate to be closer to the school. The Daytons, for instance, moved here just a few years ago for their son, Elliot. Lovely family. Mr. Dayton serves on our board now." My blood ran cold at the casual mention of the name. "Dayton? That sounds familiar. Derek Dayton? He's quite prominent in local business circles. Real estate development mostly. His wife passed recently. Very tragic. But he and Elliot soldier on. Such a bright boy, Elliot. Wife. Not Catherine, then. Someone else." The threads of this tapestry were becoming more tangled by the minute. I thanked the receptionist and left with a stack of brochures I would never read. Back in my car, I pulled out the photograph of Finn and compared it to the mental image of the boy in the Founders' Day picture. No doubt remained. They were the same child. My next task was clear. I needed to find the Dayton home. But Waynesville wasn't large. How difficult could it be to locate a prominent real estate developer's residence? As it turned out, not difficult at all. At the local diner where I stopped for lunch, the waitress was happy to gossip about that big house Derek Dayton built behind the old covered bridge, apparently a source of local controversy for its size and ostentation in a town that valued modesty. "Can't miss it," she said as she refilled my coffee. "Only thing on that side of Miller Creek. Got a gate with stone lions and everything. Folks around here say he's compensating for something." She winked conspiratorially. The covered bridge was a local landmark, easy to find on the outskirts of town. A wooden structure from the early 1900s, it spanned a rushing creek that tumbled over smooth rocks on its journey downhill. I parked in a small gravel area near the bridge and walked across, my cane tapping a nervous rhythm on the weathered planks. Beyond the bridge, a paved private road curved away through thick pines. I followed it slowly, each step sending jolts of pain through my knees. After about a quarter mile, the trees opened up to reveal a sprawling modern home of glass and stone, utterly out of place in this rural setting, like a spaceship that had landed in a pasture. And there, in the circular driveway, was a black sedan with a license plate beginning with JGT, the same car I'd seen watching me outside the bank in Asheville. I stood frozen at the edge of the property, partially concealed by the trees. What was I doing here? What did I expect to accomplish, an old man alone against whatever powerful forces had conspired to fake my grandson's death? As I wrestled with these questions, the front door of the house opened. A boy emerged, backpack slung over one shoulder, school uniform slightly rumpled. He paused on the steps, looking back as if responding to someone inside. Then he continued down to the driveway, shoulders slumped in the universal posture of pre-teen resignation. Even from this distance, there was no mistaking him. Finn, my Finn, alive and breathing and impossibly changed. Taller, leaner, his features sharpening toward adolescence. But unmistakably the boy who had once sat on my lap while I read him Portuguese folk tales, the child who had buried his face in my shoulder at his grandmother's funeral. Without thinking, I stepped from the trees, driven by a grandfather's instinct that transcended reason or caution. "Finn," I called, my voice barely carrying across the distance between us, but he heard. His head snapped up, eyes widening as they locked onto mine. For one breathless moment, the world contracted to just the two of us, separated by 50 feet of manicured lawn and 12 years of lies. I saw the flash of recognition in his eyes, saw his lips form a word that might have been Vovo, the Portuguese name he'd called me as a child. My heart soared with wild hope as I took another step forward. Then the front door opened again. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face instantly recognizable despite the years. Not my son James, as I had feared in my darkest suspicions. No, this was Derek, Catherine's brother, Finn's maternal uncle, a man I'd met only twice and had always found coldly calculating. He took in the situation with one glance, his face hardening to granite. In 2 swift strides he reached Finn, gripping the boy's shoulder with unmistakable possessiveness. Then he looked directly at me, his eyes narrowing with recognition and something darker, threat. Inside, Now. His command to Finn was sharp enough to carry clearly across the lawn. The boy hesitated, looking back at me with an expression of mingled fear and longing that tore at my heart. Then Derek's hand tightened on his shoulder, and he turned away, hurried back up the steps and disappeared into the house. Derek remained on the porch, staring me down with cold fury. I stood my ground, though every instinct screamed at me to run. After what seemed an eternity, he went inside as well, slamming the door with deliberate force. The message was unmistakable: stay away. But I had seen Finn's eyes. I had seen recognition. And in that moment, I knew I would never stay away again, not while there was breath in my body and strength in my limbs. My grandson was alive, and somehow I was going to bring him home. The drive back to Asheville was a blur of mountain curves and churning emotions. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, not just from the arthritis that plagued my joints, but from the shock of what I had discovered. Finn was alive. My grandson, supposedly drowned 12 years ago, was living with his maternal uncle under a false name. The question that hammered at my brain with each passing mile was simple: why? What possible reason could there be for such an elaborate deception? What had James known? What had Catherine been involved in? And most pressingly, was Finn in danger? The boy's expression when he saw me kept flashing through my mind, that split second of recognition before Derek's threatening presence had forced him back inside. There had been fear there, certainly, but also something that looked like desperate hope. By the time I arrived home, dusk was settling over Asheville. The familiar shape of my modest bungalow offered none of its usual comfort. I sat in my parked car for several minutes, trying to organize my thoughts, to formulate some kind of plan. I was a 73-year-old retired history teacher with bad knees and a heart condition. What could I possibly do against someone with Derek Dayton's apparent resources and ruthlessness? The answer came with surprising clarity. I could tell the truth. I drove straight to the Asheville Police Department, clutching the school photograph of Finn Elliott in one hand and the note from the bank in the other. The desk sergeant, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked up as I approached. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her pen poised over a notepad. "I need to report a kidnapping," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "My grandson was reported drowned 12 years ago, but he's alive. I've just seen him in Waynesville." Her expression shifted from professional politeness to concerned skepticism. "Sir, that's a very serious allegation. Why don't you have a seat and I'll get someone to talk with you?" 20 minutes later, I was seated across from Detective Marcus Reed, a stocky man in his 40s with close-cropped hair and the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much of human cruelty. "Mr. Harrison," he began, after I'd recounted the entire story, "I understand your conviction, but we need more than a resemblance to a child who would now be a teenager. Do you have any proof that this boy in Waynesville is your grandson?" I pushed the banknote and school photograph across the desk. This note was passed to me by a bank teller who has since disappeared. The handwriting matches my grandson's from before his death, and this photograph shows him at St. Christopher's Academy, where he's registered as Elliott Dayton. Detective Reed examined both items, his expression unreadable. "Even if there is a resemblance, Mr. Harrison, legally speaking, your grandson Finley was declared dead. We have death certificates, cremation records—" "False records," I interrupted, frustration building in my chest. "There was never a body. The casket at the funeral was empty. My daughter-in-law disappeared with the supposed ashes a month after the funeral." He leaned back, studying me with a gaze that seemed to be assessing my mental competence. "And you believe your son was part of this deception?" The question struck like a physical blow. "I don't know. James was devastated by Finn's death, or he appeared to be. I've always thought he was a victim in this, but now—" I trailed off, uncertain. "Mr. Harrison, these are very serious allegations against prominent people. Derek Dayton is a major developer in western North Carolina. He sits on several boards, including the regional banks." He tapped the note from Thomas. "The same bank where this teller supposedly warned you." "Not supposedly," I insisted. "He did warn me, and now he's gone." Detective Reed sighed, pushing the items back toward me. "Here's what I can do. I can take a preliminary report and make some inquiries about the bank employee, but without more substantial evidence, I can't justify opening an investigation into a 12-year-old drowning case that was thoroughly examined at the time." I felt as if I were drowning myself, struggling for air against the weight of disbelief. "So you're saying you won't help me?" I'm saying we need more to go on, he replied, not unkindly. Something more concrete than a grandfather's hope and a resemblance to a child who would now be a very different-looking teenager. I left the police station with a case number that I knew would lead nowhere and a growing sense that I was on my own in this. The system that should have protected Finn had failed him once. It appeared poised to fail him again. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold and a legal pad filled with increasingly desperate notes. How could I prove what I knew to be true? What evidence could possibly be compelling enough to force the authorities to act? The answer, when it came, was both obvious and terrifying. I needed to get Finn to tell his own story. The next morning, I drove back to Waynesville, arriving just as the school day was ending. I parked a block from St. Christopher's Academy, watching as students streamed out in their uniforms, laughing and calling to each other with the universal exuberance of children released from classrooms. And then I saw him, Finn, Elliot, walking alone toward the bike racks, shoulders hunched slightly, as if trying to make himself less visible. My heart lurched at how isolated he seemed among the chattering groups. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I got out of the car and approached him, moving as quickly as my arthritic knees would allow. "Elliot," I called softly when I was close enough. He turned, his eyes widening with that same flash of recognition I'd seen at the house. He glanced around nervously, as if expecting Derek to materialize from thin air. "It's all right," I said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I just want to talk to you. Do you remember me?" He swallowed hard, his hands fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. "You were at our house yesterday," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before that," I pressed gently. "Do you remember me from before?" Something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, fear, and beneath it all, a desperate longing. I don't know. Sometimes I have these dreams." He stopped, glancing around again. "I have to go. Uncle Derek will be looking for me." "Please," I said, taking a step closer. "I'm Edward Harrison, your grandfather. Your mother, Catherine's father-in-law. You used to call me Vovo, Portuguese for grandfather. My wife, your grandmother, was from Lisbon." He stared at me, a tumult of emotions crossing his face. "I have to go," he repeated, but made no move to leave. "Finn," I said softly, using his real name for the first time. "What happened to you wasn't an accident. You didn't drown. Someone took you away from your family, from me. Don't you want to know the truth?" His lips trembled. "Mom said," he began, then stopped himself, looking stricken. "Your mom, Catherine." My heart pounded. "When did you see her?" He shook his head vigorously. "I can't talk about this. Uncle Derek says people will try to confuse me, try to take me away. He says they're dangerous." "I'm not dangerous, Finn. I'm your grandfather. I've been searching for you for 12 years. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a faded photograph. Finn at 6 sitting on my lap, both of us laughing as Maria took the picture. "Look, this is you. This is us." He took the photograph with trembling fingers, staring at it as if it were a message from another universe. For a long moment he said nothing, his breathing shallow and quick. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "I remember the cinnamon smell. In your kitchen." My heart soared. Maria had always made cinnamon cookies when Finn visited. "Yes," I whispered, "every Sunday afternoon. Uncle Derek says my parents died in a car crash when I was little, that I hit my head, and that's why I don't remember." His voice was small, uncertain. "That's not true, Finn. Your father, my son James, is still alive in Asheville. Your mother—" I hesitated, not wanting to overwhelm him. "We need to find out what really happened to her." He was silent for a long moment, then raised his eyes to mine. They were filled with a wisdom far beyond his years, the kind that comes only from enduring unthinkable things. "Mom told me never to trust Dad," he whispered. "She said he was dangerous, that he would hurt me if he found us." The words struck me like a physical blow. James? Dangerous to his own son? It seemed impossible, and yet I remembered the locked basement, the chained chest, the words scratched into the wall. Before I could respond, a car horn blared from the school pickup lane. Finn's head snapped up, his face draining of color. "That's Uncle Derek. I have to go." He thrust the photograph back at me. "Keep it," I urged. "And Finn, I'll help you. I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you again." He hesitated, then quickly tucked the photograph into his jacket pocket. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Same time." Then he was gone, hurrying toward the black sedan where Derek waited. his face an expressionless mask. I watched him go, my heart pounding with equal measures of hope and fear. I had found my grandson. He remembered me, and tomorrow, perhaps, we would begin to unravel the web of lies that had kept us apart for 12 long years. But as I drove back to Asheville, a new worry gnawed at me. What if James was not the victim in this story, but the villain? What terrible truth awaited in the answers to my questions? The night after seeing Finn, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, his face appeared, that fleeting moment of recognition, the whispered promise to meet again. By dawn, I had made a decision that would either save my grandson or destroy what little remained of my family. I was going to seek legal help. The attorney's office was in downtown Asheville, a modest suite in a building that had seen better days. Charlotte Weaver had been recommended by a former colleague at the high school. Tough but fair, he'd said. She takes on cases others won't touch. At 75, with salt and pepper hair cut in a practical bob and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, Charlotte looked more like a librarian than a crusading attorney. But when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms. "So let me make sure I understand, Mr. Harrison," she said, after I'd explained my situation. "You believe your grandson, who was declared dead 12 years ago, is alive and living under a false identity with his maternal uncle. You have no concrete evidence beyond a resemblance, and what you believe is matching handwriting. The police have been unresponsive, and you want me to help you." "What exactly?" Put that way, it sounded absurd. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. "I want to bring him home, to learn the truth about what happened, to find out if my son was involved, and if so, why." Charlotte removed her glasses, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "You understand that what you're describing, if true, involves multiple serious crimes. Faking a death, forging documents, possibly kidnapping. If your son was involved, he could face prison time." "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But I need to know the truth, and more importantly, Finn needs to be safe." She was silent for a long moment, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Harrison. This is a case most lawyers would refuse. It's complicated, potentially expensive, and the odds aren't in your favor, but..." She paused, seeming to come to a decision. "I had a case years ago. A little girl who disappeared from her bedroom. Everyone assumed she'd been taken by a stranger. Turned out it was her father, in a custody dispute gone very wrong. No one believed the mother when she insisted he was responsible. I didn't listen to her as carefully as I should have. By the time we found the girl, she'd been moved across 6 states and taught to fear her mother." Charlotte put her glasses back on, all business again. "I don't like making the same mistake twice, so here's what we're going to do. First, we need documentation, anything that proves Finley Harrison existed and that Elliot Dayton's appearance matches him. Second, we need to establish a connection between the Daytons and your family beyond just your word. Third, we need to find this bank teller who passed you the note." I left her office an hour later with a list of tasks and a glimmer of hope. The biggest priority was my meeting with Finn that afternoon. Charlotte had advised me to record our conversation if possible. Evidence of his own words would be invaluable. The drive to Waynesville that afternoon felt different. Where before there had been desperate hope and fear, now there was purpose. I arrived at St. Christopher's Academy 30 minutes before dismissal, parking where I could watch the exit without being obvious. When the final bell rang and students began pouring out, I scanned the crowd anxiously. Minutes passed and the flow of children dwindled to a trickle. No sign of Finn. Had Derek kept him home? Had he been warned to stay away from me? Just as I was about to give up hope, a side door opened and Finn slipped out. He looked around cautiously before heading in my direction, his backpack clutched tightly against his chest. My heart leapt at the sight of him, my grandson, walking toward me of his own free will. "You came," he said simply when he reached the car. "I promised I would." I unlocked the passenger door. "Do you want to talk somewhere more private? I won't take you anywhere you don't want to go." He hesitated only briefly before climbing in. "There's a park about 5 minutes from here. Uncle Derek never goes there." The park was nearly deserted on this chilly afternoon, just an elderly couple feeding ducks at a small pond and a mother pushing a toddler on the swings. Finn led me to a bench partially screened by rhododendron bushes. "I don't have much time," he said, perching on the edge of the bench as if ready to flee at any moment. "Uncle Derek thinks I'm at chess club. He'll expect me home by 4:30. I nodded, trying to contain my emotions at being so close to him. Finn, or do you prefer Elliot now? A shadow crossed his face. I don't know anymore. Sometimes I forget which one is real. They both are, I said gently. They're both you. But Finn was the name your parents gave you. He was quiet for a moment, studying his hands. I remembered more last night, about before. I remembered a basement with a blue carpet and a woman who sang to me in a language I didn't understand. That would be your grandmother, my wife, Maria. She sang Portuguese lullabies. I swallowed hard. Finn, what happened? What do you remember about the day everyone said you drowned? His face clouded. It's all jumbled up. I remember being at a creek with Mom. She was crying. She kept saying we had to hurry, that Dad would find us. Then Uncle Derek came in a black car. Mom seemed relieved to see him, but also scared. I remember getting in the car and Mom telling me to be very quiet. That's all. Your mother didn't die in that creek? He shook his head. No. She lived with us for a while. Me and Uncle Derek. We moved around a lot. Different houses, different towns. Then one day she was gone. Uncle Derek said she had to go away to get better, that she was sick in her head. He said she'd come back, but she never did. My mind raced, trying to piece together this new information. Catherine hadn't abandoned James after Finn's death. She'd staged the drowning and fled with Finn, apparently terrified of my son. But why? And what had happened to her afterward? Finn, why was your mother afraid of your father? He looked away, his shoulders tense. She said he had a darkness in him, that sometimes he wasn't himself, that he might hurt me. His voice dropped to a whisper. She said he'd already hurt someone else and gotten away with it. A chill ran through me as I remembered the basement in my house, the scratched words on the wall. Mommy told me not to scream. Had James imprisoned his own son there? Was that why Catherine had fled with Finn? Do you know where your mother is now? I asked gently. Finn's eyes filled with tears. Uncle Derek says she's in a special hospital for people who are sick in their minds, that she doesn't recognize me anymore, but I don't believe him. Sometimes I think... He trailed off, looking afraid. What do you think, Finn? I think she might be dead, he whispered. And I think Uncle Derek might have had something to do with it. The words hung between us, terrible in their implication. If Catherine had fled with Finn to protect him from James, only to end up possibly murdered by her own brother, what twisted family drama had my grandson been caught in the middle of? Finn, I said carefully, would you be willing to talk to someone else about this? A lawyer who might be able to help us figure out the truth to keep you safe? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'm tired of secrets, of pretending. I want to know what really happened to Mom, and... His voice broke. I don't want to live with Uncle Derek anymore. He scares me. What does he do that scares you? I asked, dreading the answer. It's not what he does. It's how he watches me, like I'm something valuable that might break or run away. And there are rooms in the house I'm not allowed to enter. Ever. He says they're for business, but sometimes I hear voices behind the doors, people crying. Finn shuddered. Last month, a girl about my age was staying in one of those rooms. I saw her once when Uncle Derek thought I was at school. She had the same scared look in her eyes that Mom did. A new, horrifying possibility dawned on me. What if this wasn't just about Finn? What if Derek was involved in something even more sinister? Will you help me? Finn asked, his voice small but determined. Will you help me find out what happened to Mom? Yes, I promised, knowing in that moment I would move heaven and earth for this boy. I'll help you, Finn. We'll find the truth together. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled envelope. I found this hidden in Mom's old jewelry box. Uncle Derek doesn't know I have it. It might help. Inside was a faded photograph and a key. The photograph showed Catherine with a woman I didn't recognize, both smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. On the back was written, Me and Constance, Pinehurst, 2010. Constance Dayton. The woman whose medical records I'd found partially burned in my basement. Who is this woman with your mother? I asked, pointing to Constance. I'm not sure. Mom called her Connie. She visited us sometimes, when we first moved in with Uncle Derek. Then she stopped coming. Mom cried a lot after that. The pieces were starting to fit together, though the picture they formed was still incomplete and disturbing. I glanced at my watch. It was almost 4:15. You should go, Finn. I don't want you to get in trouble with your uncle, but I promise I'll find a way for us to talk again, and I'll get help. real help, to keep you safe. He nodded, suddenly looking very young and vulnerable. I'm scared, he admitted, but I'm also tired of being afraid all the time. On impulse, I pulled him into a hug, feeling his thin body stiffen in surprise before he gradually relaxed against me. You're not alone anymore, I whispered into his hair. I found you once. I won't lose you again. He pulled away first, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I should go. Uncle Derek checks the mileage on my bike. He'll know if I take too long. One more thing, I said, pulling out my phone. Could I take a picture of you, for the lawyer, to help prove who you are? He nodded and I quickly snapped a photo. As he stood to leave, I handed him a small flip phone I'd purchased that morning. Keep this hidden. My number is programmed in. If you ever feel unsafe, call me. Day or night? Finn took the phone, tucking it deep into an inner pocket of his backpack. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said with more confidence than I felt. We open the door that's been locked for 12 years. We find the truth. I watched him pedal away on his bicycle, my heart both lighter for having found him and heavier with the burden of what lay ahead. Whatever darkness had torn our family apart, whatever crimes had been committed in the name of fear or greed or power, the time for secrets was over. The truth, no matter how painful, was finally going to come to light. As Edward's story shows us, sometimes the most painful truths are buried beneath layers of deception created by those closest to us. What would you have done in his position? Would you have found the courage to pursue the truth, even when it meant questioning everything you thought you knew about your own family? At 73, with nothing but a handwritten note and the faintest glimmer of hope, Edward chose to run toward the unknown rather than live with comfortable lies. Family is meant to be our sanctuary, our foundation of trust. Yet in this tale, we've seen how easily that foundation can crack when secrets and fear take root. Edward's journey reminds us that love, true love, persists beyond betrayal, beyond time, beyond even apparent death. It takes immense bravery to confront the darkness in our families, to shine light into corners where shadows have festered for years. But without that courage, healing can never begin. Perhaps the most important question isn't what happened in the past, but what we choose to do with the truth once it's revealed. If this story resonated with you, if you found yourself holding your breath as Edward pieced together the mystery of his grandson's fate, please share it with others who might find meaning in his journey. Subscribe to follow more tales that explore the complicated bonds of family and the resilience of the human spirit. Like and comment with your thoughts. Would you have trusted your instincts as Edward did, or would you have dismissed that note as impossible? Remember, sometimes the most extraordinary truths arrive in the most ordinary moments, like withdrawing money from a bank on what seems like just another Tuesday,